have strengths that aren't mine. It's different to say it than it is to actually do it. To like actually be humble enough to go, huh, maybe organization is not my strength, and I actually need to like hire somebody, and then not just hire them, but empower them to do that job. Because there's a difference between I plugged you and played. I get it. I'm not, that person. And hey, I'm actually going to empower you. Like, I'm not just going to dump this on. I'm going to empower you. I want you to thrive in that. I'm going to go find the different strategic pieces around my team for them to thrive. So maybe I'm not a great public speaker. Am I okay with this person speaking if it's not my thing, even though I am the face of the company? I know I'm comfortable enough and humble enough to equip, empower, and encourage those people. That is a really important skill. I talk about the difference often between here and here, head and heart, or a lot of head knowledge. I think most people can read a book and know that. They know that, oh gosh, I can't play right tackle and quarterback at the same time. That's impossible. I think very few allow this to connect to this and are humble enough to really put that into play. That's powerful.
Along those same lines, sort of like internal disconnect obviously leads to external conflict. And one of the things that he said was kind of a hard won lesson was not shying away from conflict, particularly as a leader, right? So
Yeah.
self-awareness leads to, what we would call one of our values, like clarity, right? Internal clarity and self-awareness. You can have conflict in a much healthier way when you have self-awareness.
Mm,
Like your others' awareness actually can flourish and grow when you have clarity internally.
yeah.
And so, I'm passionate about conflict. I tell people all the time about 60% of the work that I do with my clients is giving them a lens and essentially five tools for having conflict, right? It's like 5 styles that you can go practice and you can go plug and play when you're in a conflict to navigate the conflict in a way that's healthy and authentic and actually
Yeah.
leads to resolution. It's perpetual avoidance or turning conflict into competition, oftentimes that we want to kind of fall into those ditches, right? And the truth is that sometimes we should avoid conflict. Sometimes we should be extremely assertive and fight for certain things. But by and large, large majority of the time, we're kind of somewhere in the middle between those two extremes, collaborating, compromising, and working towards a healthy third option with people.
Yeah.
And I think that skill is critically important for leaders.
Yeah. Tell me more about that, Brad. Tell me more about why my self awareness helps me with conflict and understanding others.
Well, don't you think in order to have a healthy conflict, you have to know what you want?
D- Did you just ask my question? You just asked me a question right back? You son.
I'm a coach. I'm a coach. That's what I'm supposed to do.
What was your question again? I got lost because you just.
Don't you think that if you want, or if you're going to have a healthy conflict, you have to know what you want going into it? I mean, if you don't know what you want, then what is it that you would be having conflict about?
Okay, we're just gonna have fun with this. I'm gonna say maybe I don't know what I want yet, which can be the source of a lot of conflict. Maybe I have an idea of what I want.
Could be that you know that you don't want something that you feel is being forced on you, and
Sure.
that's leading to a conflict,
Yeah.
right? But there's a big difference between solving for something you don't want and solving for something you do want. When you're solving for
What's
something you don't want, we call that a lose-lose, right? Because the other person who's trying to force you into something loses, and you also lose because you don't know what you want.
Yeah. So my awareness to go back all the way would be: do I understand myself and what I want, what I'm hoping to get out of this situation, and hopefully my awareness of me gives me a better understanding that, because for me, self awareness is twofold, and I want to see if this adds up with you. All right, so that's the part on me, right? And I control me, and that's great. But for me, my own self-awareness hopefully helps me put myself in the spot where I can be curious about what the other person actually wants and seek to understand. Like, if I can get clear actually on what I want, for me, typically, can I, if I'm really healthy and I'm really living into that self awareness, I know that I know what I want out of the situation. And if I have a good grasp on that, then I can actually kind of take that, put that on the side, and go with, Stephen Covey's, hey, 7 habits of highly successful people, like always seek to understand before seeking to be understood. That to me is what is powerful. I
You 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 would say that. You would say that because you are an others focused person.
Sure.
You would say that because rather than getting your needs met 80% of the time, you are going to seek to meet other people's needs 80% of the time.
I mean, yes and no. All right, I like this. This is fun because yes, I agree with that, but also here's the manipulative sick side of my head. I know intrinsically about people that if I actually stay curious about what you want, I have a much better chance of getting what I want because yeah, but actually rarely I haven't had the case where if I'm still curious about what you want, I don't think I have very many cases where this is not true. um, because it means that I have to assert myself over you. As long as I'm curious about the other person, we can get to this end result and what they want, right? And we can do it in potentially a collaborative way. Sometimes it's collaborative, sometimes it's not. But I haven't found the case where seeking to understand what Brad wants doesn't help me actually get to the solution, even if the solution is what I want.
Okay, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with more often than not, being curious and seeking to understand will serve you in getting what you want. However, caveat being, when the other person doesn't reciprocate that, it becomes very difficult to sustainably get what you want with a person who's actually not that interested in understanding you,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. I
And
mean, I
and
don't, yeah,
unfortunately, in my experience, as leaders, right? As leaders, particularly when we're dealing with high performers, right? High performers are oftentimes low self-awareness. Now, the highest of the high, the best high performers, the ones that are healthy and that sustain high performance over time, I think you and I would both agree, they move past that lack of self, lack of others awareness pretty quickly. And that's why they sustain their performance, right? Because they can do exactly what you're talking about right now.
sure.
But most of the people that I work with who are high performers, they became high performers by being very, very determined to get what they want when they want it, right? And to produce results.
Sure.
And that is a different kind of function than um, helping other people get what they want.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I agree. I was looking for the infinite game. I thought I had it here because I was going to say, Brad, we should remind everybody to go read this book because he talks about just that. He talks about that idea and kind of the disconnect, the burnout, the all those kind of things, And I don't think it would change. It's going to change my. It's not going to change my approach. So I'm still going to be curious about what somebody else thinks. Um, even if I'm going to lead them to water that I want them to drink.
Yeah,
But
and I totally think, yeah, I'm agreeing with you in that with the right person, a style of conflict that is highly cooperative, that is very much planted in meeting their needs is super healthy and effective. But I do think that there are individuals who engage with conflict in very win-lose styles. And those types of people have to be confronted with boundaries. They have to literally, mentally, emotionally bump up against the word no, right? Or
sure,
an obstinate opposing force in
yeah,
order to understand that they can't have something that they want, or that something that they want is inappropriate for the other person, or what have you.
sure,
And so, um,
Yeah,
It,
we
it,
should do a whole series on conflict here. It'd be great.
yeah, there's so much, and I spend 60% more than half of my time, the majority
Well,
of my time helping people just work through how do I engage in this conflict with this person.
yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. And I've had a client recently, and this is where I actually think the curiosity wins the day. Like I had a client that was kind of upset. We had started to have some conversations and so forth, and we figured out what they were upset about wasn't actually what they wanted or needed, and there was just a bunch of miscommunication, right? And to be fair, oftentimes I think that what happens in conflict is both of us share what we want without trying to understand the other one and stay curious about it and ask a bunch of questions. And actually, if we asked a bunch of questions and we actually said what was on our mind and our thinking, we might actually get to the result that we wanted more quickly. But we spend so much time actually avoiding that dance and not talking about it or quasi talking about it that we end up in the spot where it becomes way bigger. Because usually the problem, like I would say, most answers are simple, they're just not easy. Like most of the time in that conflict, the answers, what needs to be done is pretty simple. It may not be easy, but it's pretty straightforward. And I think one thing that could unlock so much of that is really staying curious. And I think this was Chad that talked about this, the idea that, like, what could I be missing? What could I be missing? Even if you're missing nothing, even if you are the boss, and ultimately you have the trump card at the end of the day, and we're going to do whatever the you want, right? Like if you can approach it with that, it's really hard for even your high performers to refute much about that. It's really hard because you come with a sense of let me understand this from your lens. You know, they could be totally way off, and it may not be the direction the company needs to go. But that's going to be hard to like, yeah, refute, rebuttal, go up against. It lays a common ground.
I think that what people need is they need to know what the mental move is after they've been curious and they have the answer to what the other person that they're in conflict wants. When they understand what that thing is, then they have to think about the strategy to help that person get what they want without fully and completely sacrificing their own needs, right? We
Sure.
can we can all take it on the chin every now and again and give just give without anything in return. But the reality is that for all of us as people, right? And the cliche is the oxygen mask, and it's the cliche because it's such a good example, right? Like
Yep.
if
Yep.
I if the plane was going down and I walked from row to row putting everybody's masks on, and I'm running out of air and I'm flying around all over the place, like, well, pretty soon I'm going to be dead, right? And there's not
Sure.
a lot of good that I'm going to do to the rest of the group of people I'm with when the plane finally, gets back on track or lands or whatever it is, right? And so I think that curiosity, it leads to a really clear place, but we've got to figure out once we get to that place of clarity, what our kind of action items are to make sure that we maintain our own integrity through meeting that person's needs. And I know this is true of you. It's true of me. There have been instances in my life where I've been very quick to meet someone else's needs, and I have not, to use a Woosterism, kept inventory of my own in that process.
Sure.
And I get further and further down the line in an agreement, meeting that person's needs to find myself accidentally, inadvertently resentful of the fact that I never expressed my needs in that relationship or conflict.
Sure.
And then rather than take ownership of that, I blamed the other person because they never asked me what my needs were.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think being curious, it leads the horse to water, but the horse still has to drink, right?
Yeah. I mean, you still have to be courageous. It doesn't. It doesn't take anything else out of it. Like you still have to look. If I only ask you what you need, but I never share what's going on in my head, that's not that courageous either. Like it gives the appearance of it, but then I'm kind of the martyr that like came in and let me solve. And yeah, that typically leads to bitterness and resentment. You either have to understand that that's what you're doing, and I'm just here to serve this other person, or You go, okay, cool, cool. If I was to be really brave, what would I say right now? Okay, yeah, you know what? I totally agree. I didn't see it from that perspective. Is that true? If that's true for you, then fantastic. If it's not and you have different, then it's time to be courageous. It's time to share that. And then look for what's, the Michael Scott win win win, right? I win for successfully navigating conflict at work. But truthfully, that's the goal. And if we stay curious, we can understand, hey, how are you approaching this thing that we set a vision for and that we're going towards? How am I approaching this thing? And then how do we approach this thing together? That's where the curiosity can actually equal alignment, but it doesn't equal alignment if you are not courageous enough to A, ask, B, do it humbly and actually listen, and C, share what is going on for you too, like what's occurring for you, what's coming up for you as well.
That's really good.